What's going on, everybody? Welcome to this week's edition of Xenos Crossing Podcast, the podcast where we talk about competitive play, the meta as it stands, and specifically factions and as they are currently. Today I have my guest, Daniel Redehace here. Daniel Redehace, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
A little background on Daniel. Daniel's currently a top 25 player in the ITC. He's been playing Custodes to a very high level all throughout this season as it started. Had a lot of success with Grey Knights before that. And I look forward to seeing what else you can do. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Daniel.
Thanks,
Who are you?
Thanks, Steve. Thanks, Steven. I'm just a mid-tier local 40k player. I'm centered out in Orange County, and I work during the day. I do all my stuff, and I go ham in 40k. I love competing. I love being part of the team, and I just love being involved in all this.
There you go, man. There you go. Well, glad to have you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Right on. So if you guys don't know, today we're going to talk a lot about custodians. The reason we're going to talk a lot about custodians is because there's been a real broad spectrum of opinion on them. There's been a lot of high level success. There's been also a lot of talk about some stuff being not so powerful as it stands. And they've been established for quite a while. So we have a lot of data on them, and we can kind of get a good understanding of where they're at in the meta. And that's what we hope to do today. So like we said, we got Daniel, our subject matter expert, here to kind of talk a lot about what success he's found, what you've ran into, some weak points in the army, some strong points in the army, and ultimately towards the end of it, how to beat them, right? Mm-hmm. That's what we always go for.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about custodians right now as it starts with their state in the meta and kind of what we think about the army. So, as far as ranking goes and how they match up into other things, Daniel, where do you kind of find custodians as they stand? How do you feel organically that their power level is amongst everything else? And what do you kind of think for their future trajectory?
So I think that custodians are definitely in the top three. I think that it's Tau, Harlequins, Custodes, and I think Eldar is still, like Craft World Eldar is up there. I just don't know if, there's not enough data, you know? And I think that they're definitely top three. I think Harlequins in their current state are better. I think that Tau in their current state are better. I am very optimistic about what next week. I think that the changes are going to be great. I am very, very excited.
Me too. Good. Okay, cool. So, as custodians are that big, overbearing, durable aspect. And I think that their new book kind of totally brought that into the forefront, where I felt like beforehand you had armies that would out-durable or out-elite the custodians. I don't necessarily think that that's the case anymore. I think that they've kind of really found a niche and hammered that home. I think they do it well. I think they've got a big, robust set of rules and stratagems like they should. That allow you to interact with a lot of different stuff. And I think that, in a lot of the game state, you can really feel like you can't quite kill these guys. Mm-hmm. What is wrong? Dude, or like,
it's frustrating.
And it's frustrating. And that's an interesting thing about that army, because I think that I felt, as I started to play through the game, that army started out as like one of the menaces. It's like, dude, no matter what I throw at this army, it'll never die. And then as I play, I compete more, I elevate my skill level, start playing major events, super major events, start learning and getting the game going. You understand the fundamentals of how to beat them. And I think that a lot of people get discouraged by that as newer guys. And then moving forward and in the higher levels, it's kind of the inverse of that, where it's like, dude, sometimes I don't have enough models and this and that. So let's talk about stratagems that they have. Let's talk about some of the strengths of custodians. Mm-hmm. What do you think that right now, especially with the 9th edition and the newer missions, what do you feel like the real strengths of custodians are? What do you think makes them shine? Mm-hmm. And then what do you kind of think, Daniel, are the things that really hammer it home and lead you to success with that army?
So I think the number one is stratagems. You have the Emperor's Auspice, which is no rerolling hits, no rerolling wounds, no rerolling damage rolls. And it's 1 CP if you're 3 models or less, and it's, I think Auspice is actually, no, it's 4 models or less, and it's 1 CP. But either way, right, being able to turn off rerolls in a meta that is dominated by rerolls. You have Tau coming in with Drop Zone Clear.
Monka.
Yeah, just everything, right? Rerolling all the things, right? And it's like, nope, gonna turn that off. Transhuman, as all Space Marine players know and love, it's very, very strong. Being able to have the martial katas, that is very, very powerful. Being able to have access to things like advancing and shooting, all of these different buffs. It makes them very, very strong in what each individual unit does. And I think that is what makes them very powerful. That on top of their saves. Everything has a 2-up save, except for Venatari without the shields. Everything is a 4-up invuln, except for the Caladius. And that in general is just such a barrier for some armies to get over. And not a lot of armies can do it. And by the time that they do get over it, it's too late.
Yeah.
You know, I already have the board. And I think that's what really makes Custodians very strong. And also just all the inlaid profiles are very, very good.
Yeah.
All swords for Custodian guards are good. Lances are great. I mean, even Telemons, they're still really good.
Yeah.
And that's what matters.
Yeah, they have a ton of good data sheets, as they should. You know, I feel like everything in that army should be pretty good. You know, you mentioned that they have the ability to a lot of defensive stratagems. Before we get into katas, because I do want to talk about the lot, because that's always one thing that for me, I don't play Custodians, and I'm always running into it. I'm like, oh, you know, what's really going on with these, and some stuff that I probably as a player could research a little more. So we'll walk through that a little bit. But you mentioned some of the real defensive stratagems that are the real standouts that people know. I can't re-roll against you. I can only wound you on a 4-up against a T5 multi-wound model with a 2-up, 4-up. You know, it's awesome. What are some of do they have offensive stratagems that are super solid? Like when you're moving into anything that's sort of offensive with Custodians, regarding stratagems, what are you using? What's out there? Like what as if I'm playing against you, what can I expect to be coming my way offensively?
So offensively, it's primarily the katas. A lot of their stratagems are very defensive based. I'm trying to think of any right now, and I can't really think of any offensive strats except for the one to put you in a different kata. And I think that's really where a lot of their strengths offensively come from. Also, a lot of it is just built into their profiles.
Right.
There are a few. There's a strat for infantry. If you fall back, I can shoot you. So that's really cool.
Yeah,
so
that
if
is
like
cool.
Venatari, I can just blast you with my lances. I think that being able to fall back and shoot for 1 CP for flying units, that's a very good offensive strat. So if you lock up my bikes, you lock up my Caladius, 1 CP, fall back and shoot, and then, you know, I'm good.
Okay. Yeah. So not much then. They're more durable oriented
Yeah.
in the stratagem. So if I'm expecting any stratagems coming at me,
Yeah.
they're going to be more durable.
It's consistent damage over every single turn. That's really what you're getting at there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, so let's talk about katas then, because I'm not super familiar on what they are, how they work. I've played into Custodians tons of times in tournaments, and I literally almost don't pay attention to my katas because I feel like the way that I fight that army is almost kind of through non-engagement and focus fire or just you know, a lot of the movement phase. So let's talk about katas. Let's talk about what some of them do and how you impose them as a player. So when you're setting up your katas, they kind of work like command. What is
Kinda
it?
like-
What
so-
is a kata?
So katas are kind of like doctrines, right? But each doctrine, so you have the Devastator Doctrine, the Tactical Doctrine, the Assault Doctrine, right? I have 3 katas, but each kata has 2 stances, and you can choose to be in what stance you want. So you can choose to be in stance 1, and then next command phase I can go into stance 2. And then if you have Trajan or the requisite Warlord trait, you can then shuffle your katas once per game, which is very, very powerful. There are 2 particular katas that are very offensive. It's Decatari. It's the second stance in particular. Your weapons, you can choose to become damage 1, and what happens is you get additional attack.
Okay.
So if you're -1 damage, like Death Guard, Dark Angels with the banner, it's like, all right, cool. I have an additional attack because I'm already -1 damage.
Okay.
You also have Rendax. This is very good in the like Crusher Stampede meta. So you get 6s to hit, auto wound, and that's in combat and shooting. And then for the other one is you get +1 strength when you charge or heroically intervene if you're targeting a character or monster. So both of those are against characters and monsters. So it's a very restrictive kata, that's Rendax, but it is very powerful. If I see you have a lot of Redemptor Dreadnoughts, if you are Crusher Stampede, I'm taking Rendax. And I'm probably gonna start in Rendax, because if I go first, I'm coming for you. And Dakatari is my personal favorite. I think the first stance is -2 to your Consolidate and your pile-ins. The other one is +1 attack. Very good on things like Lightning Claws, lances if you're -1 damage, just really able to clear hordes.
Yeah.
All the other katas, based off of what I remember from this, I really just pull the cards out, you know, just like, all right, here you go. They're all action based. You can advance and shoot with one of them. You can double shoot, but that doesn't really come into play very often.
Okay.
So, a lot of versatility.
So they kind of seem to just press you between volume and quality, and they really are one of those things that like a doctrine is supposed to do, is to take you from your baseline and just really push you over that edge to really get the jobs done at the time you need them done.
Very much
Almost
so.
like the Necron command protocols. Okay, got you. So then, and you're saying that most of the time people are really looking to start kind of or roll in Dakatari traditionally until you're in that moment where you really want to pounce in Rendax. Otherwise, unless you're a faster build, then you're probably going to see people that are more alpha strike you going for Rendax first.
Yeah.
And that could be a thing that you could watch out for almost. Like, hey, I'm starting in Rendax. It's like, okay.
Yeah, you got a plan. So like if you're going to take banners, you know, you're going to do the, it's the one, I think it's Callistus, where you can advance and still do actions. You can fall back and I believe still do certain things. But you really have to plan out, you know, it's imagine like if you had Space Marine doctrines, but you could choose the order that you wanted to be in, right? So it's kind of like that, right? Exactly. And that's what's valuable about it. So like I can sit there and say, okay, I want to do this and then this and then this, but I've got Trajan. So let's say you go first, and then I don't want to be in that kata anymore. I can just shuffle them once per game and then start in something else. You know, so there's a lot of flexibility there, and which is where a lot of the value is for Custodes. That really is what pushes them over the edge.
Right.
That and the shield host traits, which are just excellent. I think there's maybe one that I'm not really a fan of, but it has play.
Okay. So talking about shield host, let's go into that. So we know, all right, so we've got our doctrines, our katas, we've got our stratagems, mainly durability based. Let's talk about our shield hosts. You can equate those to chapter tactics, right, of the Space Marines. So talking about that, we've seen a lot of dominance from one. Which one is that? Emperor's Chosen?
Emperor's Chosen.
Right.
Yeah.
And explain to us what is Emperor's Chosen and why is it so strong and why is it the forerunner?
Okay. So Emperor's Chosen has a lot of value. The stratagem allows you to be another shield host for a turn for a single unit. So if you have a guy locked in combat, you want to fall back and charge, make you Solar Watch for a turn. Emperor's Chosen get to innately reroll a hit roll or a wound roll, which is very good on salvo launchers, for just in melee in general. They also have a Warlord trait that allows them, for like a shield captain on bike, for every model that he kills, he can make an additional attack up to 4 times. Very, very strong. So there's a lot of value there. The relic, I don't remember what it is, but I don't remember it being anything important.
Okay.
But that shield host has dominated the meta. You don't really see anything else.
And then they've got the 4-up for mortals.
Yes, the 4 protection from mortals, which is
ridiculous. Because most people,
very
when they fight custodians, they're like, okay, you got all this durability.
Yeah.
Mortals is the answer, easy.
Yeah, and
Well,
they have
that
6 up.
completely nullifies that, right?
Yes, sir.
So which is huge. Okay, and that's what makes that do you think makes that the most important, the strongest one?
It's the stratagem and it's the rerolls. Just having a floating reroll is so good.
I guess on all of those high quality shot, you're not really shooting a lot of volume out of custodians in most cases. You're shooting salvo launchers, you're shooting the guns from does the Caladius get that?
Yes, it does.
So the Caladius is gonna have that, or if you're shooting, if you have dreadnoughts or Telemon or whatever, there's a lot of high quality guns are getting better efficiency. I love it, okay. So that's why they're there. And then 4-up mortals protection is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Because it's like, now what do you do? Like now you just have to try to plow through this ultimately durable
Crusher
rules layer.
Stampede, just sorry. You know, it's
Good, okay. And then, okay, so obviously that makes sense why that's the best one. You just have max efficiency and a little bit more durability in there. And just versatility too, which is huge in a durability army, which is what makes the katas and that stratagem specifically so good, because you can flex, and if there's an advantage to be had in Solar Watch or in something else, you can have that for a turn while you don't forfeit all of that durability. I see how that makes sense. Moving forward, and then there's a few other that are sticking out right now. Me personally, once again, I think that Solar Watch has a lot of play right now, and I've seen some really nasty fast builds with it.
I love
But
Solar
you're
Watch.
playing emissaries. Well, let's talk about Solar Watch. Let's tell everyone, what's Solar Watch doing? What do they do? What are their kind of trait, relic, and stratagem?
So Solar Watch get +1 to charge and +1 to advance. And then they also are allowed to fall back and charge, which is awesome. It is completely just unbelievably good. That coupled with the Warlord trait, Sally Forth, you can select an infantry unit in the charge phase to advance and charge. They can charge after they advanced. So it's not an aura, you can't select bikes, but a unit of Anatari, a unit of Shield Guard, they're advancing and charging, and they get +1 to charge, and they're already advancing. They get +1 to advance, so it's +2 plus whatever the d6s that you roll. The stratagem is you subtract 1 from attrition tests if you kill their warlord. Not great, but maybe we'll see it one day. But attrition is not really something that's super, super valuable in the game right now.
Yeah.
But it's really the fall back and charge in that warlord trait. I love the warlord trait.
So fall back and charge is insane on custodian bikes. It's like, dude, because usually another thing that I would do if I was playing, for instance, my Eldar is I'm like, okay, I'm just going to tar pit you down. Like, you can't fall back. It's how I handle. It's I could take 1 unit off my plate for the turn while I deal with the other one. Blah blah blah. All of a sudden, you can't do that, and they fly. So I'm like, this is crazy. That's good. Also, the Venatari unit that can really get in your face fast like that is really good.
Yeah.
You can, especially if you're playing against someone that hasn't really, if you haven't seen that look before, it will catch you slipping. Especially if you're used to a normal setup, you're in your normal algorithm, and you're like, all right, this mission, this is what I kind of do. I fought Custodes a million times. It's like, this is not Emperor's Chosen.
Yeah.
Like, this is not playing the same way.
It'll catch you slipping.
Yep. So that's crazy. That's good. And I think that there's a lot of play there. Also, here's a thought. What's the relic? Is it that lets a dude teleport?
That is Praetorian Plate.
Can you combo Praetorian Plate with the Warlord trait, Sally Forth?
So Praetorian Plate happens at the end of the charge phase. And I believe Sally Forth happens at the beginning of the charge phase. So you would have to already have been in combat. I put it on a bike captain because he moves 14. And then he's running up with Venatari.
Oh, so I thought I was going to figure out some cheekiness. So you can't actually pull that dude up. No. Oh, I was like, that could be so dirty. It'd be
so good.
Right on. Well, it's still, I think that's good. And I think that a bike captain then makes a lot of sense. You zoom him up, he can turbo boost if he needs to. Yeah. You can get that Venatari unit where they need to go. And I think that that's fast. And then, which leads us to what we think is kind of the next most viable one, or in your opinion, more viable, would be Emissaries.
Yeah. I'm very torn because I love Solar Watch, but I went to a tournament, I did really well with Emissaries, and I've just been really stuck on it because they're fun. It's
been working.
Their shield host trait's great. So their shield host is they ignore all hit and wound modifiers. So,
oh, that's really good.
Yeah. So right. So you can have a unit of Sagittarium advance, shoot both their profiles into dense with lightning fast, -4 to hit. I'm still hitting on 2s.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Very good. And then I fight first. So all my units fight first.
Is that an Emissaries thing? Is that one of their traits? Always fight first and ignore penalties to hit?
Yeah.
And that's both melee and range?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
Yeah, so I tell my opponents, they're like, oh, I'm gonna lightning fast. Please don't.
Yeah.
You take your CP back. Let's go back and I'm just gonna hit you on 2s anyway. Yeah. Fighting first, it's kind of like a less good version than Solar Watch. So I don't have to fall back because I already fight first.
Yeah.
So I lose the +1 to wound on the bikes because I didn't charge, but that's okay.
Yeah.
The big thing for me is there's the Warlord trait, which expands an aura by 3 inches. So on a Vexilla with -1 to hit, it is very strong. So it's a 9-inch bubble of -1 to hit.
Yeah, that's good.
Very, very strong. And then it also gives him a Warlord trait, an additional ability where everyone within 12 inches of him that's Custodians, leadership 12. So if you're Drakari, Incubi, I'm not fighting last.
Yeah.
So I'm fighting before you. And then unless you've got Grizzly trophies, then you have to roll an 11. So there's a lot of value there. But the crux of the entire list, I think, for me, is the stratagem, Into the Darkness. You spend 2 CP on a unit of anything that's 3 models or less, or 3 CP if it's more than 3 models, they get to pregame move.
How far?
Make a normal move.
A normal move.
Yeah,
wow.
So it's Venatari, they move 12. If it's bikes, move 14. So my list has 5 bikes, all salvo launchers. And then if I go first, I'm going to pregame move bikes 14 inches, and then I'm going to move 14 inches again, and I'm going to charge you.
Yeah.
And just deal with this.
Yeah,
right?
which is once again, I think that speed with that durability is crazy.
Yeah.
That's a lot. Okay. I mean, going first, that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, in the competitive mindset, we don't bank everything on going first.
Yeah.
And then do you use that defensively, or when do you activate? You can make that decision if you've gone first, or
So we roll off, and then I get to pregame move. And it says if you both have pregame moves, whoever goes first gets to pregame move first. So a lot of times I will put a piece of terrain in the middle of the board, like an L-shaped terrain, and I will put my bikes over here or over here, and I'll cast Lens Mar. I'll use the relic to redeploy them, and then I'll just pregame move them 14 inches behind a piece of terrain. And it goes, okay, so there's a unit of bikes there. Do you want to come out? So it's kind of just this huge deterrent. So they're just waiting to get into position to do something.
Right.
And it's just such a big unit that like I can drop 4 CP, do all the things, and then just go into combat. And they fight first. So if you don't kill them, I'm fighting before you, and all of these things. So there's a lot of just, it's a really big, just like a guy standing around the corner of a wall with a brick, like waiting for you. Like,
Yeah,
come on out.
I think there's some merit too to having the larger unit, because you're going to gain more mileage out of Arcane Genetic Alchemy. You're going to gain more mileage out of Emperor's Auspice, and then people are going to really want to bring that unit down. And now you're almost saying, what are you going to do? Not shoot my 5-man bike unit that's going to wreck you, or you're going to have to sink, at a very inefficient manner, a lot of firepower and fight power and all that stuff. So it seems like you're kind of making that bad decision.
Well, and the big thing too is Custodians have the secondary, the Auric Mortalis. So it's immense value if I go first. If I select that target, you better not have it on the table if I go first, because I'm going to go after it. It's like, all right, 15 points.
So perfect. Let's talk about that. So love the build. That makes a lot of sense. That I didn't know you were doing that. That's pretty cool. So secondaries, you brought up a good point in secondaries. Let's talk about the decks a little bit here too, while we're talking about a lot of the strong points of custodians. 3 secondaries, yeah, or 4?
I think it's
3 that are predominant, right?
Yeah.
What are the 3 secondaries that Custodes people are really using that are in the book that are valuable? And which ones are you thinking the best? You mentioned Auric Mortalis. Let's start with that one because I don't know what that is.
So Auric Mortalis, if we're gonna, interestingly enough, I actually don't really remember the other secondaries because I've never taken them.
Okay.
Auric
So
Mortalis is
they're
the
not
one to
super
take.
valuable. So for you, and now is that predicated just on the list, or is that kind of the consensus amongst most Custodes people? You're just playing the Auric Mortalis or none.
It's the consensus. Might of Terra is basically like another version of Stranglehold, but it's less good.
Okay.
And so like you can't take that and Auric Mortalis. So it's like I might as well just take Stranglehold and Auric Mortalis.
Right.
So Auric Mortalis is you select the most expensive unit in their army unless they have a Supreme Commander. Then it has to be that. And the way that it works is you get 5 points if you kill it, if it's destroyed. You get 10 points if it's destroyed in combat. And you get an additional 5 points if it's destroyed in combat 6 inches away from your deployment zone. Now the crux of it is every time that unit kills a custodian unit, you subtract 2 from that score.
Got it. So it's like, almost like a timer. Okay, cool. So your 5-man Vike unit wants to move up. You got a target on whatever it is. You just gun for that thing, and as long as you can smash that thing, it's going to be in their deployment zone. So you meet that criteria, right? It's the most expensive unit, obviously that's what makes it the target, and then you're just going to shoot it and charge it, right? So there's a good chance you kill, and then that's just 15.
Yeah.
And then
basically.
as long as you do that before it kills anything, they can't really do anything about it.
Yep. And that's the big thing is it basically forces your opponent to say, I can't have this on the table. If it's Dawn of War, I'm going to get to you. You can't hide. Like I played Logan at a tournament recently. We played Hammer and Anvil. He placed his whole army on the back line. And even if I went first, it's still a 9-inch charge. I could still get to him. And it's such a big problem for certain armies because like I can't have this expensive unit on the table because if I go second, I lose it and he scores 15 and the game's not necessarily decided, but it's already going my way.
That's a huge head start. Yeah. Right. And then they're at the at the mercy of trying to mitigate that lead, which is where you don't want to be. You don't want to be fighting out of a hole.
Also, if they put it in reserve and I go first anyway, that's 2 turns that it's not on the table.
And you get to just, now you've effectively nullified or blunted their most expensive unit, whether it's offensive or defensive.
I win anyway. That's the point, right?
Yeah, for the first 2 turns. I like it. That seems like it makes sense. So you're typically playing for that. You're playing for Stranglehold. And what's the third one? Is it mission dictated or is it kind of another preset one?
It depends. I like banners a lot. I have a lot of infantry. I take 2 units of shields. I take 2 units of Sagittarium. I take Trajan, and then I usually take a Vexilla so they can raise banners, they can do all these things. But it's really, it's a lot of times it's banners, Stranglehold, Auric Mortalis. Stranglehold and Auric Mortalis are almost always on my list. I don't ever really not take them.
Yeah.
It's just, it's a great secondary.
Right. Okay. Cool. Well, I mean, dude, that sounds good. And I think that, Auric Mortalis seems like it stands out as a pretty obvious choice, especially if you're going in on that Alpha Strike kind of mentality. It seems like I would do that. And then also there's a lot of trickery in the redeploy and then pregame move. That's a very Alpha Legion thing of you to do.
It's silly because I get to redeploy any units, any 2 units, and I go, okay, so I went first. I'm going to move these bikes out from behind the terrain, put them on the line, or I'll just have them on the line, and then I'll redeploy them back. And then I'll just say, okay, pregame move. And I'm already in a good position. And I have, like I said, I have a lot of infantry as well. So, but when the bikes are in your face, right, everything else is getting into position. So it's like, by the time you deal with the bikes, I'm already where I want to be. And I'm just going to stay there.
Yeah.
And, I have some units that can, cause problems for you. But it's really just the bikes. And I think that's kind of the crux of the list is just, I've considered going up to 6, but coherency problems are a real issue there. It's also just blast and stuff like that. Also, it's expensive.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. And I think that the strategy seems solid. It makes me instantly contemplate, like, how would I deal with this? What do I do? And I'm like, that's an interesting, I got to see. Okay. So, custodians also universally, and I know this because when I was starting 40k back in 8th edition, they were always one of the hardest armies to deal with as a newer player. Like, oh, my cool stuff just does nothing to you.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some things. Let's get into the next portion of this. First off, what do you think are some favorable matchups, and where do you think the custodians really shine? And then I want to segue into talking kind of about what we can do. What are some of the weaknesses of the army? And as a general, what should other players be trying to do to kind of circumvent some of those strengths and win? So let's start out with kind of what's the most important thing, or what are some of the most important things with custodians? What are your strengths? Where do you think your favorable matchups are?
So I think in favorable matchups, a lot of them are older codexes. I think that's just kind of a given because they haven't really had the TLC that they need to become really predominant in the meta. I think in Marines, I do very well. I think that in honestly, a lot of Craft World matchups, I do very well. There's just not enough shots, like not enough high strength shots to really get through my stuff.
So you think custodians do pretty well into the new Craft World stuff?
I think
like
they do.
These non-interactive scat laser builds and all that stuff.
AP0, I'm not super concerned, you know?
Right. Cool.
So yeah, in Guide and Doom, I can immediately turn it off. So there's just really no problem there. Also, the pregame move into Eldar is brutal.
Yeah.
I can shoot a Night Spinner. I can charge a bunch of Hawks. I can consolidate into the Hawks. Like there's a lot of ways to just really kind of shut you down for a turn. And I think that's a lot of value. That's where a lot of their strength is the brute force and the 2-up, 4-up. Our good friend Nick, you live and die by the 4-up invuln. If you fail your 4-up invulns, you're dead.
Yeah.
But if you just tank them over and over and over, it's really hard to just get around that. And I think that that's really where their strength lies. Is just that 4-up
super
invuln.
durability.
Yeah.
Super durability. Yeah, and I mean, that's a frustrating thing too. If you don't have the right AP, if you transhuman, the thing is they can take away a lot of this stuff that you would really pump into it to make them efficient. And they just have the raw stat lines to really just nullify a lot of stuff, which is interesting. I find myself always having to over allocate to custodians just to get the damage done that I want to. And even then, you still kind of have to have it in your mind that you just might not get the job done.
Yeah.
And if you do, what's your other plan? Because don't go. I think the biggest downfall of custodian players and one of the big strengths they have is it's really easy to bait somebody to go all in against a unit and expect to kill it and be dumbfounded when they didn't kill it and it's still there. That's a big deal. And I think I've seen that happen on a lot of tables, especially like mid-table stuff, where people will really set up these plays and be like, all right, I'm going to shoot that 5-man bike unit with this unit, that unit, and then this unit. And I'm going to do this spell. And I'm going to take that unit out, and then I'm going to play the game. And then they do all of that, and sequentially, it just doesn't get the job done. And then they're like,
bad news.
oh, and then the game is almost sometimes decided on that. I think that's a huge one. I mean, how often does that happen to you?
Yeah, it does. I think that a lot of also certain Tau lists that tailor into Harlequins, they take Flamers, they take AFPs. I had a tournament where the guy shot all of his crisis suits into a bike unit and killed 3. There were still 2 left. And then they just went on a rampage and they were charging things, locking things down. And that's really what it is you kind of have to overcommit to the custodians. You have to just completely wipe it out. And again, they have the strat to heroically intervene 3 inches. So, if you get really close, so good.
Or just posting up on an objective and then like someone wants to touch it and take it and now you can't.
Yeah. Against GSC, same thing. Like I just lock down objectives and it's like, all right, you're never touching this objective again.
Yeah.
That's another good pairing for Custodes, depending on what list you're running.
Right.
But yeah, it's very, very frustrating for that. Like, that it's just like you shoot it and he just won't die. And it's like, man. But that's what custodians are. I have so few models.
You're right.
So it's like they need to live.
Right.
But
Yeah. So I think that's a good thing. They incentivize under commitment into stuff. I think it's easy to bait things out and nullify them with stratagems. And then I think they have the tools to really just take up a position and be really difficult to route out. So, all right. So moving to the flip side, when it comes to conquering Custodes, I'm rolling up, I'm playing whatever army I play, I'm standing across from you. Let's talk about some of the weak points you find in Custodes, some of the things that have brought about your demise, and some of the stuff that you think is a shortcoming for custodians. Like, what are some of the problems you have with Custodes?
So I think the primary problem is I have so few models, so I have to be very stingy about where I commit. And I think that for custodians, they cannot play the attrition game.
Right.
Their attrition game is not dying. So if you're killing my custodian units faster than I'm killing your stuff, we have a problem.
Right.
And what's interesting about Custodes is like in that situation, you can back off and you can still do well. So it's like you have to really know when to put your foot on the gas pedal and also when to back off and just like go back to your objectives and consolidate and just try and score. And that's a big weakness. Also, only having a 4-up invuln, there is a lot of variance there. Like you could shoot into a unit and they just all die.
Right.
And like that's a problem. But that's dice. So, and we're not going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's other shortcomings. I don't really see that many because they're very durable, and that is the problem. Also, I mean, I guess another problem for them is other very durable armies. We talk about this a lot. I think that Dark Angels Terminators are a very hard counter to Custodians.
Right.
I could throw my whole army at 10 Terminators. I probably won't kill them.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Right. I think that another thing that has been brought up a lot as far as shortcomings too is most of the volume in melee, from my understanding, is all 2 damage. So they actually have a real hard time in melee dealing with -1 damage things. Is that a truth?
Yeah, and that's where Dakatari comes in, so you can get an extra attack, but it really doesn't have the same effect. Like if you're charging a unit of 3 bikes into, let's say, 5 Dark Angels Terminators with Storm Shields, you're killing maybe 2, maybe. And that's not a lot. And they're going to punch you back and probably kill 2 bikes, and that's not a fair trade.
Right.
And that's getting around the -1 damage is big, and there is a lot of that in the meta right now, which is very prevalent. I see a lot of people taking things like that, like the banner, for example. A lot of value there. -1 damage on this unit. Well, I'm not going to charge that unit because it's kind of worthless. To do so.
Yeah, so I think you would say they do struggle into the -1 damage thing. It's kind of tough to deal with in melee. So as a player, if you're trying to go against, like, deal with Custodes somewhat, that could be a tech piece that could help you there. And then you think model count's the big one. So here's another one, an interesting thought. How do Custodians deal with like horde stuff? Like say we're talking about like demon hordes or maybe gaunt carpet kind of stuff. I don't know if even of those are relevant, but those are just some prominent horde builds.
Yeah.
When you deal with a lot of body count, how do you deal with that?
So that's again where Dakatari comes into play. Oh, you have 1 wound, I get +1 attack. I also I take Aquilon Terminators with the Lightning Claws. They're strength 6, AP 2, 1 damage. They get additional attack, so they have 4 attacks base, +1 for the Lightning Claw, +1 in Dakatari, and they have a Misericordia. So you're getting like 7 attacks per model, re-rolling to wound on the Lightning Claws. They're just going to blend, 20 Acolytes, 20 Gaunts.
So it used to be kind of 8th edition where they didn't have that output, and you could almost like body block, or things like big blobs of nonsense could stop them, slow them down. Now your Custodes have the tools to deal with that, so that's not something you can really tech into.
You have to tech into that, though. I think that normal Custodian lists, maybe bikes could do it because they have 4 attacks, you got a 5, and then you have the dagger. So like there's, 3 bikes could probably kill a bunch of Gaunts, but it's all about, like how many ones you roll and stuff like that. But I think, I run the Aquilons, I think they're great. And it's a great tech piece if you run into Dark Angels Terminators, you run into Gaunt spam. Demons you don't really see a lot of, unfortunately. I've played against demon players, and it went very well for me just because they can't punch me back very hard. Bellicor is a menace, but if you can pre-game move and get to him, it doesn't matter. You know? So there's a lot of problems there. But hordes,
So hordes aren't as much of a problem as they used to be. So that's kind of something we can dispel a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's really just -1 damage is kind of stopping you, and just if you are damaging enough to really reduce your model count to control the board like you want to. Those are the 2 big downfalls.
I think Necrons have play into Custodians if you run a lot of Warriors, just because they're really difficult to kill. If you get the 5-up invuln and you get the regeneration or the reanimation, there's a lot of play there. I've stuck in combat with Warriors for 2 turns, and it's very annoying.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. Well, that's anything in the game. Dude, Warriors is so annoying. So moving forward, if we were talking to some newer guys then playing whatever army they want to play and they're up against Custodes, let's talk about some things they can do on the table. Tactical stuff you could do in order, and like your game plan, what you could expect. And if you were going to give some advice to somebody in more of a coaching mindset to go up against these guys, what do you think would be some key points, some key deployment things, maybe some thoughts on some secondary picks and things to watch out for on the table?
So I think, aside from list building aside, so like you're not tailoring to fight Custodes, you're
at a tournament, you're bringing your broad-based list, you might have a tech piece or 2, just general consensus advice.
I think taking secondaries that do not interact with their list. Taking Assassinate, not really great. I think Mental and Tarot is really valuable, but I could also just hide my characters, which is also valuable for you because then they're not interacting with you on the table. So like you're not scoring secondary points, but Trajan, Bike Captain, Praetorian Plate, they're not interacting with you now.
Right.
So, it's kind of a trade there. I think things like banners, because Custodians are somewhat slow. Venatari are fast, but bikes don't have OBSEC, so they can't steal your banners. The R&D is valuable there. Engage on all fronts. If you could just try to
Play around them.
play around them, and then just single out pockets and get rid of those units. Gameplay wise, I think if your list is optimized, which it should be, I think that trying to bait out those bikes and trying to get those units out into the open so that you can shoot them without risk of being shot back. And terrain placement is very critical there. I think that is one thing that ensuring that you have firing lanes where you can shoot a unit of bikes and you can kill them, or at least kill 2 of them, right, to kind of neuter them, and not really get clapped back by 6 bikes with salvo launchers.
Right.
And I think that's where the value is there for people who are not super experienced. Also, measuring things, just really being diligent on where units are, and then just asking your opponent. Like, if you're not really familiar with Custodes, ask them questions. Just really get all that information before you make your decisions. That's the big thing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think I feel that. I think that one of the mistakes people make, once again, this is going to lean into it, is playing the game of I'm going to kill you into an army that really more or less has the most rules and the most resilience towards that game plan. It seems straightforward, but a lot of times they do have things that can bait you into that. So if you're trying to go up against them, I think one big key point is to understand that, yeah, it's 3 dudes, but they're 3 of the most durable dudes in the game that are designed to not die here. So don't make all-in plays and don't make all-in secondary picks, right, going into kill mode against them. That's a big thing. Trying to take back and hold the board and kind of play around them and force their small resource of units to commit in certain areas that you don't necessarily have to be, to where you kind of play around them and focus on areas that you want to be, right? That's another big thing you're saying. And then also kind of just be aware of what they're trying to do, which is generally get out there with a bigger bike unit or maybe several small bike units, really just put a lot of pressure on you and then kind of hold the back and they kind of accordion out. If you can get behind and kind of play that weak point behind them and manage the strong units, but really put the damage on the hind units, you can put a pretty...
I think, and the big thing is just, Logan's going to love this, but shoot them. Melee is very difficult to deal with Custodians. Things like Tanglefoot Grenade, you can subtract D6 from your movement phase, or subtract D6 from your charge. So if you line up a perfect charge with your Blood Angels, and let's say you're not running Sangard, right? Tanglefoot, minus D6 charge, on average that's a 4. So you're subtracting 4 from your charge now. You fail that charge, they're going to die. And just shooting, that's really where it is.
Just more of the stuff that kind of baits into the, you think you got it, you don't. Okay. So playing around them, and I think that's a huge thing also too, recognizing how your lethality probably stacks up, against them, and understanding that, like, do I have the resources to kill this army? If yes, maybe proceed. If no, then reevaluate kind of what you're trying to do. Cool. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, Custodians are in a great spot there. I think it's good. I like that you're optimistic on where they're going to be moving forward. I think that they are one of the armies that might see a little change, but they're not going to see a ton. I think that we've really outlined some sick strengths that they have, what defines the army, what makes it good. And I think that also, we kind of dive into what you don't want to do, what not to do into Custodians. Like, let's not try to kill these dudes and go all into it. So I think that's key. And I think we've kind of summed it all up. Is there anything else that you think would be, solid on Custodes? Any other pieces of, last words about Custodians?
Yeah, I think with the upcoming data slate change, I think we're going to see, I hope we see a significant change in what people are running for Custodians. I want to see more emissaries. I want to see more Solar Watch. Dread Hosts and Aquilon Shield, not really sold there. I would like to see more Telemons. I think a Solar Watch Telemon is great. +1 to charge, rerolling charges, double fist, just going in there with 7 attacks. Also, I think depending on what the data slate brings too, I think honestly Contemptors with Volkites are going to be back in the meta. I think Volkites into Custodians, if you're Space Marines, you're in Dev Doctrine, that AP -1, very, very strong. I think you're just unloading Volkites into them. You're doing mortal wounds. I mean, if you're not Emperor's Chosen, right, you have a 6-up. So there's some value there. A single Contemptor could pick up probably 2 bikes, with some good rolls. Death Guard Contemptors are really good in this situation, but Death Guard are in a tough spot right now. But I think they would have some play in this meta. Absolutely.
So I mean, I feel I like that you're optimistic. I really think that dude, encouragement on the fast Custodes, the different looks, that's something I always try to incentivize. I love that advice. Try stuff that's out of the box, guys. Get your own mindset. Try some new stuff. And I think that the fast pressure, the fast speed, the fast durability that you're putting out there and then just those two things together is tough to deal with, and it's crazy and cool to see.
I think there's a lot of value in running non-conventional custodian units. Like you said, Venatari, I think the Aquilon Terminators have a lot of value. The Galatis and the Achilles, those are very standard, but just not units that are not used very often. Jason uses the Agamatus bikes. They're really good too.
Yeah,
the
they're good.
Pulsars.
They're expensive, but they have a high volume.
Yeah, there's a lot of play there. And I think custodians are definitely going to survive the data slate because of that reason. And I'm very, very optimistic.
Right on, right on. Well, thank you for having you, Daniel.
Thank you.
Thank you for all you guys for tuning in. Once again, if you like what you see, if this stuff helped you out, go ahead and feel free to leave your comments in the bottom so we can go ahead and get your feedback and implement it into what we do. In addition to that, always like us, subscribe us, please. It helps us keep doing what we do and get the content going and bring in guests on as we can. And until next time, good to see you. We hope to see you again.